My name is Darwin Sonoy. I'm going to be talking to you today about Office. How many of you have attended my sessions in the past? Okay, so you saw me speed talk, trying to fit everything I want to tell you into 45 minutes. We're really in trouble today. Not only do we have 40 minutes, this was adapted from a 75-minute talk. So plan on downloading the video, running it at half speed so you can actually hear what I'm saying. I might sound a little bit like Mickey Mouse now and then as I try to keep everything within our 40 minutes here. I've got a really long title up here. I modified it somewhat from what's in your brochure. Microsoft has unfortunately created a lot of terminology. I think that they're eventually going to become the company Microsoft Office 365, formerly known as Microsoft. Office 365 is getting tacked on to everything, and the Office nomenclature is unfortunately getting tacked on to everything. Gartner, someone who had a discussion with Gartner at the company I'm contracted at, said that some companies don't even know that there's this new deployment technology, Click to Run. They just grab the MSI, start deploying it, and then realize, oh, we're not licensed for this. We're only licensed for Click to Run. So this is how bad the terminology has gotten that people don't even realize there's at least two very distinct ways to push Office 2013. There's a third way, which is to turn it into an App v5 package that is supported by Microsoft. It'll only be given a brief mention, but you should know that there's that third way as well. That would be part of your Click to Run license if you chose to do that. So let's get into some of the details. One of the things is, when I first put this session together, it was Office 365. Then Microsoft recently added the ability to deploy just individual products. Before you had to deploy the whole suite or nothing. So now a lot of companies are going with Lync only. So they push Lync first because it's a big change for meetings, a big change for IM if you use that in your organization. How many people use Microsoft's IM, either Communicator or Lync 2010 already? Okay, so a lot of you. So that's a pretty broad effect because it changes substantially, especially if you're all the way back to Communicator 2007, like the company where I'm contracting. So we're going to try to unravel some of that, but Office 365 Click to Run size is about 1 gigabyte. And a lot of you think, oh, we're going to deploy Lync. It's going to be a really light-duty deployment. No, it's going to be 1 gigabyte. Microsoft architected the entire Click-to-Run bundle to come down at once. Customers demanded, we want to send only individual apps. Consequently, when you say, don't send Word, don't send Outlook, the only thing that doesn't get sent is the executable for that app, and all of the file type associations, COM registrations don't go to Outlook 2013. So you have the same burden as far as deployment size for Lync only as you will for a full 365 deployment. So if deployment size is a big issue in your organization where you're working, then this might be a significant issue as to whether you bother with going Lync only first. Better. Okay. Sorry about that. I hate doing tech support while trying to do a presentation. Okay, just a little bit about myself. Subject matter expert, instructor, and blogger at csiwindows.com. Teach a lot of courses to do with everything about applications. The course that I'll be doing next week at PDS is about everything you need to know to get applications to run on Windows 7 level of technology. There's still a lot of applications that come out that aren't compliant or they assume you're going to have admin rights. We talk about how to adapt those applications so they'll work properly under Windows 7. There's a lot of tricks in the Windows 7 bag that you can apply by configuring the operating system. So you might resort to, say, virtualizing the application because of some admin rights need, and there's some simple tweak in Windows you could do to avoid that if your mode is not to always virtualize. I'm a lead deployment engineer for an Office 365 deployment to 16,000 machines. In the same organization, I'm the lead script developer for a template that we use for globally pushing application software to the same set of machines. Darwin is the code name for way too many software projects, but I am not involved in any of those. Most especially not, Windows Installer was codenamed Darwin back in the day, 1998, 1999. I had some people comment on that. The project that I'm working on, 50 countries, the company has offices in 50 countries, 16,000 machines, Windows 7, all Windows 7 now as of a couple months ago. 4,000 desktops have no local server, therefore no SCCM DP. So we have this bandwidth challenge of trying to manage those clients without any local server, and they're generally a small network link as well. 17 different languages supported for the operating system and Office. How many of you support multiple languages in the desktop and the Office environment? How many of you support 5? Keep your hands up, 5 or more, 6, 10 or more, 17 or more. I got one hand, okay. And this is a US-based company, so 17 languages globally. Office 2000, they're going from their Office environments, going from Office 2007 and OCS, then we're going to Lync 2013 click to run, and eventually to full Office 365 click to run. So that's some background from the things we'll cover today are largely gathered from that effort. We're going to make some effort to untangle some of the terminology Microsoft has around this. We're going to talk about click to run versus MSI. It's very important you understand the difference and that you understand what you're in for in terms of click to run enterprise suitability. Also, we're going to talk about, there's Agile, Scrum, continuous integration, DevOps, and we're going to talk a little bit about DevOps and how it applies to Office 365 click to run. We'll also talk a little bit about SCCM compatibility. So in our organization, the Office click to run package has to be pushed through SCCM, and there's some key bits that you need to pay attention to so that it works well with SCCM. So Office 365 is the nomenclature for Microsoft cloud-based applications. I got severely chastised by some cloud architects when in the LinkedIn 365 group I said, Office 365 Service Pack 1 is out. And I got spanked. Office 365 doesn't have service packs. It's in the cloud. It's continuous integration. You never know what version it is. Microsoft clearly says on the Office 365 Click to Run Pro Plus page that it's Service Pack 1. So Pro Plus is the little magic designator that means the desktop apps. So even though we stole the Office term from the desktop apps, attached it to the cloud, and now that's what Office 365 is. If you hear Office 365 Pro Plus, that means the desktop apps, or Office 2013 desktop apps. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Those 2013 bits are available in 2 major flavors. One is click to run. Office 365 Pro Plus is what it'll say in your license agreement if this is what you're licensed for. This is also, if you want to turn this into an App v5 package, you can convert it directly. That's the license you'd have to be operating under to be able to do that. It is not advisable, as it has never been, to repackage Office into App V or any other virtualization technology. There is a direct migration mode built into click to run Office Deployment Toolkit. Windows installer, Office 2013 Pro Plus is what it would say on your license agreement. Most likely you're not going to be involved in this decision, right? Most likely the managers are going to decide, hey, we want those 5 licenses per person, and then later on when they start getting people installed on their personal machine and calling into corporate support for help, they're like, no, we don't want those people installing those other 4 versions that they have allocated. But most likely you're going to have one of these on your license agreement. Maybe you have participation, maybe you don't. But you have to deploy the media that your licensing is for. Auto updates, the Microsoft Office 365 talks a lot about auto updates, or the click to run side does. There's really 2 portions to this. One is the technical mechanism that you all know as auto updates. You get an application once a week or once a month, it checks a website, says, yo, there's updates, do you want to receive them now? Java does this, a lot of other applications do. Technical mechanism. The other thing that is implied by using the term auto updates within the context of Office 365 click to run is kind of a continuous integration mode. You get Microsoft publishes this month's bits, they flow right into your organization, right to your desktops. And that's more of a change in methodology. So we want to keep that in mind, that I'll try to be distinctive when I'm referring to the technical mechanism versus the actual continuous integration methodology that term kind of means both at the same time. I like to go from what you're familiar with to what's new. So let's talk about MSI. So if you're going to deploy MSI 2013, it's very, very similar to how you've done Office 2010 or Office 2007 MSI. You license the product to the machine. The duration is forever. If you want that copy of Office to run on that machine for the next 50 years and you can actually keep it running, then that's your prerogative. It's licensed permanently. The license is 1. Depending on your support agreement with Microsoft, you might be allowed to do 2. So they let you put 1 for company employees can put 1 on a home machine. But in essence, they're looking at a single license. The integration is directly onto the operating system, just like any Windows app that you don't virtualize. You install it directly onto the operating system. The installation and updating mechanism is Windows Installer, which means that when we have the initial install, we have a large MSI that we deploy to all of our machines. Then in terms of functionality, if Microsoft's going to provide some significant upgrades to functionality, they do service packs or service releases for Office. These are also very large, sometimes 3/4 the size of the original distribution to get Office out, but you deploy a service release, which is usually in the form of a patch or a patch inside of an admin kit. We then have security updates for Office come through Windows Updates. So security updates are well tested by Microsoft, well tested, works a lot better than I ever thought it would, but you've probably all had pullbacks of hot fixes from Windows Updates. But they have a certain level of testing they do before they push all that stuff out, so you have a reasonably high degree of confidence you can push it, handle problems later. Or if you have to qualify it, your qualification process is not retest all of our apps because it's Patch Tuesday. So that's the mechanism for getting updates out. The timing is as you adopt it. So service release 2 or 1 for Office 2010 comes out, you decide, okay, you become aware that it's out there. You decide that let's check it out. Do we have any major risk points? Does some software that integrates with Office typically bail every time we have a service release and we have to test it? And then you adopt it, and then you test it and you push it. Customization is very granular. You can do almost anything through the Office Deployment Toolkit for MSI, for Office. You can add new stuff on. Very granular what you can do here. And you can use GPO in 2013. So one cool thing about whether you're deploying MSI or Click to Run or a mix is you can manage the group policies that are common to both just through one set of group policies. So that's pretty handy. Pro Plus, this is the new stuff. Click to Run. It's licensed to the user. So you have to be set up with Microsoft, so everyone in your company is set up in the 365 portal. If you've already done email in the cloud, by putting all your email in Microsoft's cloud, then you're already there. You already have the user identities up in the 365 cloud. But they have to be up there. It's subscription duration based. So if you have 40,000 employees and you license them this year or for the next 3 years, that's how many individuals you have licensed, and they each get 5 copies. So you get 5 copies, and they can run on any device that Office 2013 supports. And Microsoft is extending this most recently to the iOS product suite. They're extending it and improving it so it's on other device platforms such as mobile. It has an under-the-covers runtime AppV version 5. It's enhanced over the regular AppV, so it can have additional integrations. It does not store any of its files in the normal AppV5 location, so you don't want to go looking for your files in those locations. So it's an adapted version. Basically, if you're a small company of 100 people and you install Office 2013 Click to Run on all the machines in your company, you wouldn't even know that AppV5 technology was involved. You'd have no clue if you hadn't touched AppV before. That's the way they designed it to run, and largely in application testing, that's the way it seems to run quite well. It's fairly impressive with its ability to integrate with the platform. Deployment, Click to Run, installation, functionality, security updates, and what Microsoft's called performance updates are all coming down to you all the time. Continue, and if you go in Microsoft's mode, Microsoft's generally encouraging people install all your clients directly from the cloud, push it all every month, just like consumer. I'm going to talk about a little bit different perspective I have on that. But that's what you would do if you said, Microsoft, let's tell us how to do it. They would say, install from the cloud, leave updates turned on forever. You're good. You never have to pay attention to it again. Anytime IT folks who work in packaging here, you'll never have to pay attention to it again. We all have that thought, yeah, right. And if it's automatic, I can get in trouble even quicker. So it's trickle down, incremental, always on updates engine, kind of like software updates, but the whole entire software package is in that method. Also, any major updates, if they decided in Office 2014, I don't know what they're going to do with the version numbers now because it's just continuous integration. If there's new features and functions, you get that by staying subscribed to the subscription model. So there's no more any great big project purchases to get Office updated. The timing is always on, so it's every month if you leave it at its default and push everything every month. Right now, you can select major products at install time. So do I want Word? Do I want Outlook? Do I want OneDrive for Business? And then the rest of it's GPO. There's no granular registry key changes you can make, especially obviously if you're pushing people to the portal in your organization. So if they go out and log into Office 365 and download from there, you have actually really no control over what they're going to install. If you decide to do a kind of an on-premise enterprise type deployment, then you can at least say, hey, we're only doing Lync right now. Some significant release history points. In February 2014, Microsoft changed how click to run worked significantly. Some of the things we were seeing, we weren't in any kind of even pilot production yet, or pilot deployment yet. There was some funky problems with getting it to run and update the way they told us it was supposed to work. After SP1, it looked a lot better. April 2014, we're allowed to add products. And then June 2014, there's licensing support for RDS, Citrix Server, and any shared PCs you have. So before that, first user to log in, their license would be allocated to that machine, to a shared machine. And if that person logged in 5 times, then it would say, hey, you know what, you've got 5 licenses, you need to deactivate one. So they deactivate the first one. Someone else would log into that shared machine, it would take one of theirs. So there's no licensing mode for machines that truly didn't have a user associated to them. There have been multiple pullbacks where Microsoft has re-released the Office bits the second time that month, or maybe a third time. Usually it's for very specific problems. Hasn't really been, you know, oh, hey, everybody in the whole world, hold off, don't deploy it at all. It's usually been select problems where they've had to re-release the source in a given month. What business to choose? Same exact story as anything else that's plugins rich. So IE and Office are the 2 big Microsoft products. Your software developers who do plugins are not going to do a 32 and a 64-bit version. They're still supporting 32-bit only customers, so they're going to be doing 32-bit plugins. So you need to do 32-bit Office, 32-bit IE. Unfortunately, the bits for a click-to-run deployment are under this particular folder here. This Office that normally goes under Microsoft Office, then a subfolder. So when you see this, you know it's a click-to-run deployment. And under here will be your 32-bit executables. So that will probably create some confusion at times. Let's talk about how Microsoft envisions Office click-to-run working in your environment. They envision that their developers create Office, update it, do their unit tests, and they release it to their cloud. And then you use auto updates to push that to your endpoints. Commonly known as continuous integration, and DevOps is the piece of that that makes sure the ops go well. As far as I'm concerned, DevOps is really, the ops have the devs' phone numbers, right? So if something really hokey happens during deployment, the ops call up the devs and say, get out of bed, get in front of Visual Studio, fix it, because we really can't roll back. Well, I don't have any phone numbers for any Microsoft Office developers. So I'm not really comfortable with DevOps, a DevOps cycle that goes from across a company boundary, basically. So some of the challenges you have with that auto update cycle, you can't do any compat testing, release qualification, you won't have a rollback mechanism. There's a way to roll it back, but you'll never have tested it if you're in auto updates mode. You'll be scrambling for a month to try to roll it back. No install rate controls, how many people at how many sites pull it how fast. Especially on updates, you might be able to control it on installation, but then on updates after that. And no uninstall of conflicts. So there's a lot of things. Office Communicator 2007 has to come off the box for me to put Lync 2013 on and not have problems in an enterprise environment, right? So there's a lot of times there's a lot of fix-ups you have to do if you're preparing the endpoint. So I think that continuous integration ought to stay within the same boundary of a company. I'm not keen on auto updates right from Microsoft. And I think you need your own release qualification process. Does it need to be a full-blown UAT testing every month like you do when you get a new version of Office? That's up to you. Microsoft's definitely advising a lighter touch. You can go lighter touch, but go farther than Microsoft, but not as far as full-blown UAT. So I'm advising that you would have a waiting period. See if they pull back the source, just like the old idea, don't deploy anything before Service Pack 1, right? So have a waiting period. Microsoft comes out on Patch Tuesday, new version of Office. How long do you want to wait to see if there's any kind of pullback? Then dog fooding. Microsoft's really keen on this, that you run it on 100 IT desktops for a week and then you're good to go. I'm not keen on that profile of dog fooding because those people are not running the plugins that are probably going to have problems with a monthly update, right? So if you're going to dog food, I think it needs to be the people running the actual plugins to Office if you have critical ones. How many of you have you consider mission critical plugins to Office? Imaging, other kinds of plugins? Okay, not too many. Okay. There's also a lot of unknown integrations for you. Lots of stuff integrates with Office or allows you to just show a preview in Outlook when Office is installed in the right way. And so there's a lot of unknown integrations that typically don't show up until you change something major. Stakeholder UAT, so this is actual testing by people who have plugins or software that integrates with Office. And then adopt the release, so have a formal release point at which you say, I think we're good to go with this. And then using on-premise source, push to your endpoints. To UAT or not UAT, I actually already talked to this just by saying, don't just run it on IT desktops. One of the things that this whole thing is kind of flowing from is the cloud, right? So the cloud, hey, we push out new deployments to the cloud all the time. Well, yeah, there's like 10 software vendors that have software that integrate to the Office on the cloud version. All those guys are continuous integration DevOps hardcore because they understand an enterprise server environment software. You have to be testing it with every release. We have engineering plugins that are made in someone's garage. And so those guys are not probably even tested with Office 2013 yet, let alone tested with every release that comes out every month. So desktop's a little bit different in that regard. Source files. So if you're going to do on-premise source, you have about 1 gigabyte of source is the base for US English. Each language pack is about 200 to 300 meg each. In the case of where I am, 17 languages gives us a 4 gigabyte folder. And Office expects that 4 gigabytes to be intact when it goes to install a language. Now, if you don't have a certain language in your environment, you don't have to download those language packs. But if you're going to ask Office to install a language pack, it better be in that folder with all the rest of the source. All the files change every month. The cab file structure is optimized for streaming. It is not optimized for you to re-push an SCCM. So, presumably if there's only 100 megs of changes, you all would be going in there and saying, I'm expecting there's only 2 cab files that changed. No, they all change every time, so you have to re-push the source every time. And also Microsoft, we'll talk about this at the end, Microsoft advises that if you're doing SCCM, you run from server. I agree with that. That might be new for you. In our organization, everything was pushed to the client and run locally. Office was one of the first ones. It's a really significant app that we're going to run from the DP. Bandwidth planning, doesn't matter what subset of Office you're deploying, you're going to have a gigabyte up coming down across to the client. Monthly updates I've found to be 200 to 300 meg. If you skip months, it can get bigger, although we just skipped 3 months and it was super small. So it depends on the activity of Microsoft's dev team and how much fixing and integration and upgrading is going on. So it's going to be very variable month to month. I use Procmon and the file summary to understand on a given monthly update what was transferred. This is a full initial install. And it writes 2 sets of the exe files to the program files folder. So I get a 6 gig impact to the system folder. Office 365 Deployment Toolkit, totally different than the MSI one. So if you fire up the Deployment Toolkit and you think you're doing 365 click to run, and you've got all the options from Office 2010 Deployment Toolkit, you're in the wrong one. They're totally different. The one for click to run only gives you a setup exe and a config XML, and all you can do is change the config XML and run the setup exe against it. That's it. So if you're in that one that generates a nice patch for you, that is not click to run. There are 3 basic modes. Download files from Microsoft. So use the same config XML and you say download the latest release or download these specific releases. I want these 5 language packs, and you download from Microsoft. Anyone can do it. Anyone in the world can download the source because it's licensed per user. They don't care who has the source. If you don't have a proper login, it's not going to activate the product. You can install it on a client, and then you can also run a package mode, which lets you take that click-to-run package, turn it right into an app v5 package. I would be hesitant, if you were working with this, I'd be hesitant to run off and do that right away just because you're a big app v shop. I would think about it. We've had to register some DLLs directly inside of Office 365. One of the developers used a flyout for the corporate intranet that comes from an Office component. And Microsoft, of course, promoted people using components out of Office. So we had to register one of the DLLs that's sitting in that root folder that I mentioned to you earlier in order for that to work. Well, we can do that. It's in a known location. If we made an app v package out of this based on the app v GUID, those files would be in a different location and may change over time. So I'd be careful about quickly putting this into your own custom app v package right away. I would definitely take a measured step there. ODT, what can it not do that you're used to from Windows installers? Everybody's like, oh, Windows installer killer is coming along. First it was click once, the .NET technology. Well, first of all it was .NET, copy your application. Then it was click once, and now it's click to run. And everybody's always asking, pardon me, is this the MSI killer? Well, you can't remove previous Office versions with click to run. So it's going to natively go in default side-by-side mode. So if you got 2010 on there, push click to run, whether you do it from the portal for sure, but if you push it just a setup.exe/configure config XML, you're going to have 2 versions of Office now. 2013 will be the default, but you have 2, and that's done for compatibility. That's one of Microsoft's recommended moving forward modes because all your old plugins won't stop working because all the DLLs of the previous version of Office are still there, and they can interface and integrate and use them. You can't remove related software. I mentioned we have to remove Office Custom or Office Communicator 2007. We also remove all kind of tidbits of Lync that could end up getting deployed from the web if someone simply attended a Lync meeting in 2010 or 2013. We also remove other, now we've decided to remove Office 2007, so we remove that and we run the scrub script to clean it up. It does not automatically install for the default OS language. You can do this with Office 2013 MSI. You can say install US English and match the shell UI, whatever that is. If it's German, then put also the German pack on and make it the default. You can't do that with click to run. You have to sense yourself, oh, this machine has German as the Office, as the UI of the OS, so I'm going to install the German language pack in addition to English, maybe if that's your standard. I just always install English. It does not automatically aggregate products. So if I send out Lync 2013 to all 16,000 clients, tomorrow someone says, yo, we need Office OneDrive for Business before we do the full-blown Office project. We need you to push that out. If I just push out a new command that says install OneDrive, all my machines now have OneDrive and no Lync 2013. So I have to script and say, what do you already have installed? Ah, okay, you already have Lync, and oh, you got this other one we didn't even expect here. Let's include those as well as OneDrive. And now rerun your config XML and get that deployed. So these are the kind of things that you end up having to script around. I'm not going to go through this list because it's basically just it's all these downsides, batteries not included, are the reasons why it makes sense to dynamically generate your config XML file that the whole setup.exe runs off of. Uninstalling conflicting software. The CDN is Microsoft's, point them to the Microsoft's global content distribution network and let it roll. Why not the CDN? Another reason is the control of the installation rate. So once you get everyone out there, maybe you control how people install it. Now they're in auto updates mode. They won't all auto update at the same time, but any given business unit in your organization or any given site is going to pull as each of those clients pull and see if there's a new version. So you may or may not be set up for that network-wise. Some gotchas that we found over time. Programs and features. If you do the quick repair for 2013, it locally looks at all these duplicate exes that it's kept, backup copies, and recopies them over the primary in case of corruption or missing. If you do a full repair, though, it always pulls from Microsoft CDN. Not only that, it always pulls the full suite. So one problem we have is we're doing Lync only. If any of those users visits admin program and says, do a full repair, they now get all of Office 2013, and we don't intend them to have it yet. So Microsoft says they're working on that one. If you go in side-by-side mode, some downsides are users end up having pinnings for the old Outlook or the old Word. They use that right away because you didn't clean it up. And when they use that, they end up causing 2007 to self-heal, and then it takes over on some stuff and creates a mixed mess. Some things you can do. The Office scrub scripts, the VBSs, have the ability to clean up all the shortcuts, scan everywhere for them. Uses the Win32 shortcut. WMI class is very fast. It doesn't look for star and LNKs. It looks in the Win32 shortcut class kept inside of WMI. So it's very fast. You could steal that and clean up those shortcuts even if you aren't removing Office itself. Another company we talked to did software restriction policies to prevent anyone running the old exes. So they couldn't run Office 2007 or 2010. Anyone tell me why you might want to disable them but leave them on the system? Any guesses? Rollback, you could roll back one person very quickly, but the other reason is all the COM registrations stay intact to all the DLLs in that old version of Office. So if they're being used by plugins and other stuff, they keep working, but users can't accidentally start up Outlook 2007 and mess stuff up. So that was an interesting approach. The installs have to be per user, but they require admin rights. So this is very much a consumer home model where I'm pulling down from the web and I'm obviously an admin on a home machine. In our organization, all of our users are admins, and so this was not a problem. But for some of you who are running in a non-admin environment, you're going to have to take a different approach. You're going to have to run it in the background, and you can run it as a background task. It's going to be a little more challenging. You won't have that user context to do any cleanups you want to do. So you can deploy it per machine, but if you deploy it the way Microsoft tells you, have your users run this. And even for SCCM, they do advise run it in user context. So it's a little bit of a disconnect there. It's harder to figure out how to do it per machine than it should be. For us, shared templates, we had shared templates for Office 2007 on the network. All you had to do in Office 2007 was register and say there's more templates out here on the network. And in the template browsing UI, worked perfect. They looked like they were local files. And the people who maintain those files could just update them on the network. With 2013, we found we had to copy the templates local. So we did that during the install. And now if we have to update them, we'll have to do a deployment to update them. We have had a lot of challenges with SharePoint and InfoPath forms. Microsoft said as of Office 2013, InfoPath is a degraded product. We will not be doing any feature upgrades to it. We'll only be maintaining it best effort. Well, the effort isn't very good so far. We've had to install SharePoint Designer. So far, we're on target to install SharePoint Designer background hidden from the user to prevent issues when pulling InfoPath forms out of SharePoint. And we have a mixture of SharePoint versions, but a little bit of challenges there. In a kind of an agile format, Microsoft is using blogs to keep you up to date on where Office 365 is and what the latest is. Some ways this is good because you get devs and other people who know the product really well giving you a dog and pony show on a feature. Other ways it's not. It took us a month and a half to realize that the shared licensing was available because on the Microsoft official websites there was no mention of it until some guy came out with a blog post that said this is how you do shared licensing and by the way it's in June. We're like, oh okay, that would have been good to know a month ago because we were looking for it. I'll show you some blogs that you can follow. Yeah, we had that challenge. Here's some blogs that you might want to follow that help you understand that sustained engineering will tell you when a new release has been made for the 365. We did a PowerShell wrapper, the same enterprise deployment PowerShell wrapper that I've been developing for over a year is what I've extended in order to do this. And so it does some of these things here. Most of this we've talked about. Turns on verbose logging for the click to run. It also does a log aggregation. So it does certain logs it searches for automatically, and then you can also specify and say, look for these additional logs based on me installing this product. And so we can pull all the logs into one folder, so when support goes and looks at it, they don't have to know. Some of the logs are in Windows temp, some of the logs are in user temp, some of the logs are in another place. They can just go to one spot and find them all. And then that means they do more work trying to figure it out because they're really curious people like me, and then they come to me with the answer instead of the question. I like that. Some possible SLAs. If you're going to let people install this on their home devices, you're going to want to be very clear that you do not support corporate software integrating with Office when they install Office off of the Click to Run portal. I think it's going to be very messy to try to unwrap what's going on in their personal machine. They might have two versions of Office, and you don't do that in corporate. So right away, you should establish a service level agreement that if they install the corporate Office licenses on home machines, which is totally okay by Microsoft, you're not going to support corporate software that integrates with them, unless you really want to do a supportability study on that to see how deep that hole could be. We are going to be detecting when people install it from the portal on a corporate machine and then remediate it by shoving our script on top of them to try to level them up to all the changes we make in our deployment script. Let's see here. Source concerns. So we do on-premise source, and that's what I would basically recommend. You're going to have to manage on-source replication and storage. Simultaneous installs, how many installs can you sustain at a time? check out the size using Procmon. Also, time to install, because Office Click to Run is very tolerant of lag, there can be unusual situations where it seems to wait a really long time trying to get source files or doing some install operation, and it doesn't mind, but your users might mind. Initially, we had turned off all the UI of Office install, figuring that we don't want these orange dialog, well, because there's only two options, silent or full, and when you do full, if it gets an error, it pops a dialog up for the user to answer, and we don't like that. So we shut it down, but then we had a lot of people going to meetings and killing the Office install halfway through. So now we leave it up so they can see the little dialog at the bottom says, I'm 50% done, please do not detach from the network. Sometimes they still have to, and there is some resiliency built into Office for that. However, at least they have a sign that they shouldn't do that. For SCCM compatibility, we only have one release of Office in the Office data folder. So I'm not going to go into the basics of the folder structure here today, but you can have multiple versions in there, and you can either select the version by which version v32 cab is. That would be if you did auto updates, the technical mechanism with on-premise source, that v32 cab file, when you switch it, all those clients will start looking for that version in that folder. And there's also the ability in the config XML to say, I want this specific version. It's going to look in a subfolder of data to find that version. We only put one version in there at a time. This is very compatible with SCCM's replication engine. So we're not refreshing the same package. Hey, you got an 8 gig package out there in all the DPs. We've added another 4 gig. Hey, SCCM, re-replicate it. And let's just hope everything happens well. Now, we're on SCCM 2012 R2. Things do happen very well replication-wise compared to 2007, but that's a lot to ask of SCCM every month. So one version in that folder allows you to have granular SCCM replication and cleanup. So when you say, oh, we're done with this version that's 6 months old, and you delete it, guess what? It cleans up the entire infrastructure for you. Where if you have it a bunch of versions packed into one folder, then you have to delete it in the source folder, re-replicate, and your replication set gets bigger and bigger and bigger for that package. So I'd really advise only one version in there, even though the infrastructure supports multiples. Also, scripting rollback is much easier because you can just script something that says roll back to this version. So let's say you push a new version, you hit 150 clients, everybody's like, whoa, big problem, roll it back. You could just rerun the old package and give it a special command line to say force to this exact version and push back to an old version. Where if you have multiple versions in the same package, you're going to have to change your scripting, update your source, and then force a rollback. And then also we can turn on the technical mechanism of auto updates because it only points to one source version. So one thing that'll happen is sometimes Office will attempt an update and it'll choke and die. Like basically, it's not a blue screen, but an abnormal error, and you click OK. Well, the next time that triggers that update check, it could very well work just fine because the user's rebooted since then or whatever. So if you have just one version out there, you could turn on auto updates and leave it pointed to the last source that client installed from, and it would give you some resiliency. We use SCCM package objects. It makes it so we can have lots of command lines. We have one for every language pack, one for Lync only, one for update to latest products. So that flexibility has been a big plus for us. We also want people to be able to reinstall and forcibly reinstall Office if that's what we tell it to do in the SCCM command line. So we don't use package objects, or I'm sorry, application objects. We run in user's context, and we run from the DP. So quick wrap up. Click to Run is a game changer in many ways. So your licensing, your installation engine, your updates model, and whether you want to opt into Microsoft's continuous integration flow right from their devs desktops to your endpoints. Customizability has changed. Runtime environment is changed. Also, I don't know what that means. Click to Run is also a non-trivial shift from MSI. So it's trivial for a home user because they don't know what MSI is and they don't customize, right? And all of your users, if they install it at home, or someone talked to me about students installing it, great. You don't have plugins, enterprise imaging plugins that plug into student laptops, right? So it's a great mode for consumer functionality, but it's a big shift if you're the IT guy responsible for getting it out, maintaining it, and guaranteeing a certain version is on the desktops by a certain date. And also, I believe continuous integration, especially crossing corporate boundaries, is a big change. Personally, I don't feel that's what continuous integration means. I would want to have the devs' phone numbers if I'm the op for anything that's in continuous integration. I think you should do your own release qualification process. I would always start with one. Back in Windows 2000, anybody remember Windows 2000 release? I want to see a show of hands. How many are? All right, lots of gray hair and no hair. Windows 2000 came out, Microsoft locked down System 32. They said, those are our DLLs, we're locking them down, too bad for you. And all of us, and I was a consultant and said, no way, this is nuts. The whole world's gonna go down in a burning fireball. Well, it turns out Microsoft was actually really good about managing their DLLs. It wasn't that big of a problem. It truly was the third-party DLLs that mostly nuked Windows and third-party drivers. And so since then, we've all had Windows file protection on, not even known it, and never bothered with it again. So that is, they did a good job there. If they do that good of a job in Office, then I'll be very impressed. But if you start with your own qualification process in place, you can always lighten it up or remove it. But if you don't start with it in place, guess what? It's going to be really hard to wedge it in later. And you're going to look kind of, in my opinion, you're going to look goofy because you didn't start with it that way. And because the desktop is messier, software development on the desktop will always be messier than server-based cloud software development, and more specialized and more small shop stuff hitting your desktops, then you're going to have to be careful about pushing new versions all the time and expecting that software just to keep up to date. Those other people who develop your plugins for Office probably are not in a continuous integration mode. And then there's a large variety of reasons we talked about in the session why you will probably not be able to use the Microsoft CDN to deploy. There's a lot of flexibility in how you do on-premise configuration. Microsoft outlines 3 primary modes for you. I've mapped, you could probably do 4 things, 3 different ways. It's crazy. It's like there could be 24 or 36 different ways to slice it. The full flexibility is up to you. Not all of them make sense, but you don't just have those 3 modes. So you could do, they tell you can do off of their CDN directly, auto updates always on, or you can do on-premise source auto updates on, or you can do full manual, you tell it whenever to install. You can actually do a bunch of flavors in between those, but you have to know where the points are that you can, what you can vary and what you can't vary and what makes sense. Just a couple notes about what we do at csiwindows.com. This ebook has been out for a while, deploying and supporting applications on 64-bit Windows. There's a lot of gotchas that you can trip over as an IT person. Once again, it's one of those things as an end consumer, you install 32-bit software on 64-bit Windows. Works fine, works great. But if you're charged with deploying that software to 2,000 desktops, all of a sudden you're like, hey, these reg keys are somewhere else. Is that where they're supposed to be? Hey, when I run regedit in 32-bit mode versus 64-bit mode, the keys are going a different place. This is confusing. This book was relevant for Win 7, but now if you're on server 2003 and you're running RDS with 32-bit software, you're going to hit all these same issues again, and those might have been left on an island when you did your 64-bit Win 64-bit migration because you didn't have to bother with them, right? Or you put them there because of 64-bit issues, and now you're going to have to deal with them if you're getting off of server 2003. Working on a course, PowerShell templating for the enterprise desktop. It's going to be very much about deployment, software deployment, and there's a bunch of other related things that people deploying software generally end up doing. Talks a lot about why, and I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow as well, why is the enterprise desktop unique in regard to scripting, and what are the kind of things you want to work into an enterprise deployment. It's also going to be a course, but we're also going to provide you with a framework that you can do your own plugins for, and we're going to continuously update that for you with new versions of that framework. And we have a way to make sure your old scripts don't break. And then also Office 365 click-to-run deployment. We're going to be doing a course on that as well. I need you, if you're interested, to go to the URL on the screen or in the slides when you download them and register yourself so we know to notify you when these are ready. Session code is 121, and even with all of our mess-ups, PowerPoint mess-ups, only 8 minutes over the original allocated time. 30 seconds for any questions.
I'm wondering, what was the benefit of your particular customer for doing this over the traditional deployment? Because you still get the same application with a different name.
Good question. So the question is, why not do MSI? The answer is, a lot of times you are getting the license, well, what the hook that the licensing gets bought usually before it hits your desk. And the hook for the licensing is 5 copies on any device, the whole bring your own device. People work at home, software is fluid. So a lot of times that's bought, and that's what you're licensed for, and that's why you have to do it. This organization considered that, but it looked like click to run was really, and it is where Microsoft's trying to go. It's just challenging to make it fit in an enterprise desktop environment if it's really structured. All right, if you have any other questions, you can catch me on the exhibit floor, and I'll talk to you about any of the content that you like. Thank you very much.